I'm Matt Mower. I'm the CEO of AgendaScope, and I'm going to be talking today about why sort of decision making is a challenge, what we can do about it, and AgendaScope, which is a platform we built to help people make better decisions. So if I just see if this bit works. Okay, so can people see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so I realize you probably all want to see the product, but I don't want to make this just a product demo, given there is a reason why we're here. So in my, I guess I would have to now say former life, I've been working with a lot of CEOs, founding teams, boards of primarily technology companies. And if I boil down all my work on sort of strategy, business model, value proposition, it all boils down to how do you make good decisions, right? So strategy, things like this are tools for making a good decision. And my experience was that I'm working with smart, capable people, but often they were struggling to make decisions, let alone make good decisions. So issues get kicked down the can, opportunities get identified and then lost. Decisions, when they're made, are made in a very ad hoc way and not necessarily generating the best outcomes, and governance not necessarily there. And being a software guy at heart, my thinking is, well, can we not use software to fix this? So I just want to prefix this by sort of talking about why decision making is important. And I don't suppose any of you would go, well, decision making isn't important. But there is something driving this, which is Hugh Stafford Smith, who alas is not here, talks about VUCA quite often. And that's this thing, if you haven't come across it, VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a term defined back in the late 80s, I think. And basically what it says is everything is getting harder. The world gets more volatile. Volatility is sort of changing on a dime, changing where you don't necessarily expect things to change. Uncertainty, we understand things are uncertain. Complexity is essentially where A doesn't follow B anymore, only nothing tells you that's going to happen. Ambiguity, an inability to make sense of things. So all these factors seem to be increasing in the world. The world is getting more volatile, more uncertain, and that creates winners and losers. And my conjecture is that the winners are going to be those who can make good decisions the fastest. So as volatility and uncertainty and all these things increase, your decision making is the superpower ability that keeps you in the game. So I want to distinguish between two types of decision. Jeff Bezos popularized this sort of type 2 language, although it's not actually his. So type 1 decisions, they're typically sort of high stakes decisions. They're very difficult to reverse. They have a lot of long-term consequences. So here's some examples. So M&A, once you've done an M&A, it's really hard to unwind it. It can be unwound for you, but that's generally not pretty. Entering a new market, often very expensive. You're burning resources to enter one market that are not then available to enter other markets. So once it's done, it's done. Major product launches, again, massive investment. Organizational restructure, again, massive investments, long-term consequences and impacts, very hard to reverse. Type 2 decisions, I mean, you're hiring a non-exec, you hired the wrong non-exec, you fire them and hire somebody else. You've set an office policy about what time we should come in the morning. It's unpopular, you change it, right? So type 2 decisions, typically low stakes, easy to reverse, either smaller or shorter impact, yeah? Now, the reason it's important to distinguish between these is, if you don't sweat the details of a type 1 decision, you can go very badly wrong. So type 2 decisions, the challenge often is you take too long to make them, right? Should we come in at 9 or 9:15? Well, if you set up a committee for this and then you have detailed reporting and we start doing an analysis about the benefit differential of that 15 minutes, right? Make a decision and go, right? Your challenge there is you spend a lot of time looking for perfect information when you should just make a decision and go. The challenge with type 1 decisions is you make them casually. So a classic example I've seen is spinning off the R&D division, right? Massive bottom line improvement in the short term, all looks great, brilliant launch, except we just killed the company because all the innovation just walked out the door. Yeah. So making type 1 decisions without fully appreciating the consequences, without really sweating the details, is the source of what kills a lot of companies. So some common challenges in decision making. I tend to whip through these fairly quickly. I don't want to talk for too long, but there is some framing that you need. So what we don't pay attention to. So we can't make a decision about something if we didn't notice it, if we didn't pay attention to it. So often problems spring from we just weren't paying attention to this, or we identified it in the future and then we lost track of it. Ineffective prioritization, right? What's priority number one today is probably priority number one tomorrow, but in many businesses, that's not how it works. The classic is the CEO goes to a meeting with an investor and the investor says, oh, what are you doing about GPT? And the CEO goes back to his team and says, GPT, all the things, right? Well, no, actually, wasn't this more important? Is this actually more important for us to do this now? Or should we stick with what was the priority number one before? How do we prioritize becomes quite important. Getting overwhelmed is the corollary to the previous two. So much stuff coming at us. How do we stay on top of what we should be paying attention to when there's a massive number of things popping up left, right, and center? Often the diffusion of responsibility, nobody takes responsibility for an item and therefore nothing really happens. And it's not necessarily the person who should be responsible for a decision who should be shepherding something through to a decision. So how do we make sure that somebody is paying attention? This is a challenge when we get to kind of making decisions. I've seen this many times where a heated debate is raging about what to do, and all the introverts in the room are kind of sat quietly back, trying to work out if this is a hill they want to die on and whether they want to fight a rearguard action into this conversation, or whether they'd rather sit back and go, you know what, life is too short. You've got good people around the table, you want to hear from all of them. So how do you give everybody a voice? I don't think anybody needs any further explanation of this. Too many meetings, everything is a meeting, everything is time spent. I've got one customer who their board meetings are supposed to be 3 hours and they're routinely quite considerably more than that. How do we avoid meetings, avoid having meetings running too long? An ad hoc process. So do we have a good process for making a decision? When we decided something is important and we need to make a decision about it, do we actually know how to do that? Often decisions are made in a very loose way that doesn't necessarily reflect the seriousness of the consequences. And often that's because when we thought about it, we didn't reflect what the consequences were. We didn't understand why this is so important. We didn't understand what rode on it. We didn't necessarily see it the right way. Improper framing. So I'll give you an example. When talking to some people and asked them about what was a challenge, one of their directors said, oh, well, should we go to this particular event or not? I'm like, well, that's not really your challenge, is it? I mean, why are you thinking about this at all? When you come down to it, their challenge is nobody knows who they are. So the challenge is we're not well enough known, of which a potential alternative is, should we go to an event? But by misframing the problem, they were immediately discussing the wrong things. So how do we frame things properly? My contention is if you want to make good decisions, you need a set of good alternatives. If you only have poor alternatives available, there is no way to make a good decision. But how do you come up with those good alternatives? How do you know they're good? So there's a lot of thing about the generation of alternatives, which is part of this notion of having a process and saying, well, actually, we can't make a decision until we have good alternatives. But that ties back to other things about, in many cases, part of the reason decision-making is so difficult is you waited so long that all the good alternatives have now gone and you're just left with the shit alternatives. So it can then be a case of, well, you've still got to pick one. So how do you pick the best of what's left? Deadlock. Often decisions are made on a one-man, one-vote basis. And that can very often lead to a deadlock with people getting very entrenched around their thing. I will die on this hill, rather than what is the best decision available for us? What can I live with? How do I compromise? There's very little ability to compromise. Inability to communicate. So a decision gets made, who knows about it? Often the last time it's heard of is when the board kind of all nod and go, yes, we've made that decision. So how is it communicated? How is it acted upon? How does it become part of what the company is doing? And then how do we prove that we made a good decision? So in other language, governance. If you've ever been in the situation of a decision's gone bad and 12 months later you're trying to work out why, half the people in the room weren't there at the time. Of the remainder, half can't remember anything at all, and the other half are remembering what they wished they'd said at the time. And then you ask for the minutes, and the minutes, of course, have recorded the decision you made, but absolutely nothing about how it was made or why it was made. It can be almost impossible. The degenerate case of this is where a business has basically voted out its directors, and the new directors are sat around going, why, I can see where we are, but why are we where we are? there is nothing to tell you. So how do we demonstrate good practice? How do we have something to learn from? So another challenge often is we don't learn. Decisions get made, sometimes poor decisions, sometimes good decisions. We don't really get any benefit from them. We don't know why we made them, so we can't learn to do better or learn to do as well in the future. That's a kind of whistle-stop tour through a whole bunch of why decision making is hard. And I'm guessing nobody is sat there thinking, no, decision making is easy, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. So that was my experience of working with people. Is decision making is riven with problems, and fundamentally it's a human problem. It's a human scale problem. So how does technology have anything really to do with that? So in a second I'm going to introduce AgendaScope, but first I'm going to tell you what it's for. Now, as I say, decision making is a human activity, and many people when I started were like, you can't solve this with technology. It's a human problem. It's about humans interacting, who shows up on the day, blah, blah, blah. You can't fix that. But like most realms of human endeavor, humans use tools to do a better job, right? So nobody pounds a nail into a board with a rock if they have a hammer available. Nobody turns a screw with a butter knife if they have a screwdriver. So in future, you won't need rocks or butter knives to make decisions. You'll have something like AgendaScope, or hopefully AgendaScope. So AgendaScope does 4 things basically. So it's about horizon scanning. It's about understanding what we should and should not be paying attention to. So how do we capture those things that may be relevant, may have impact to our business, and percolate them and go, which are the ones that are important? That's something that AgendaScope does. Yeah? So it helps horizon scan and determine what things should we be paying attention to. The second thing it does is to help with prioritization. So how, of the things that we should be paying attention to, what do we need to make a decision about, and what do we need to make a decision about first? And how do we maintain that priority in the face of all sorts of competing priorities and things coming at us? How do we stay fixed on the stuff that is most important? Where we've decided, yes, we need to make a decision about that, how do we have an effective process for making a decision? And that includes things like proper framing, generation of alternatives, positive discussion, staying sort of focused on what the end outcome is. And then lastly, how do we demonstrate governance? So how do we show that we made a good decision? How do we show that even though the decision turned out to be bad, it was the best available alternative at the time? So we made a decision, it turned out terribly. Don't shoot us, because actually if you look at it, at the time it looked like a good, all the evidence suggested this was a good decision. Yeah. So those are the 4 things that it does. I'm going to switch to showing you the product. My lovely assistant, Kim, has helped me build a little thing just to show you. So it's not going to be the complete picture, but it will give you an idea of what the platform does. So I'm just going to switch to that. Are there any questions at this point, or anything that's not clear? Or no? Good. Okay. Right. So let's find the other window and share that. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see an AgendaScope screen. You should see sort of startup dashboard, S2SU dashboard. Okay, brilliant. Just get rid of this. Right. Okay, so the first thing to say is that AgendaScope is a product for groups, for teams. So it's about how a group of people come together and make good decisions together. So in a business, you might have the board as a group, you might have the exec team as a group, you might have sales, marketing, product, all as different groups with their own agendas, their own radars. Yeah. As we go forward, we will find ways to weave these together. But the essential thing is you're looking at a team of people coming together. So in my team here, I have myself and Kim. The dashboard is showing you some highlights of what's going on in your world. So you see we have 4 live challenges. Challenge is the phrase we use for opportunities and problems. So we say an opportunity and problem is a challenge, and your job is to pick the most impactful challenges and make good and where appropriate quick decisions about them. Yeah. So this is just summarizing what's going on. So there are 4 challenges. I'm sponsoring 4 of them. How did I end up in that invidious position? Oh no, I'm sponsoring 3 of them. We haven't made any decisions left yet. We have one approaching deadline, and here are some of the things in here. The main part of the product is in the agendas, and you can see we have multiple agendas. So I'll show you creating a challenge in a second. So the draft is where challenges live that you're not ready to share with the team yet. So maybe you saw an article in the Times and you're kind of thinking, should this impact us? I want to talk to somebody else before I bring it to the team. Unsponsored will come to in a second. So latest is just a reverse chronological list of stuff in the system. We have a separate opportunity and problem agenda. We have the active agenda, and that is all the items that are sponsored. And then we have a priority agenda, which is all the items that are sponsored and scored in terms of impact. Yeah. So what does this mean? So sponsorship, first of all, is the idea that we use to keep the system under control. So as sponsor, you're not responsible for making a decision or implementing a decision. You're responsible for the decision getting to be made. So as sponsor, you're saying, I will take responsibility for moving this through to making a decision. So if that means encouraging the team to engage with it, and I'll show you the various ways that can happen, I'll do that. And the system will nag me if it doesn't happen. So the idea is stuff that isn't sponsored will get archived, so it gets hidden from you, or at least taken out of your primary view. The stuff that is sponsored, the sponsor is responsible for moving it forward. So you have these joint pressures of stuff we're not paying attention to gets moved into the sidelines, and the stuff we are paying attention to gets moved through to a decision as quickly as possible. That's how we keep control and how we sort of manage the triage process. So let's add a challenge. Anybody want to throw out an opportunity or problem in front of their business to save me having to think of another one? No, all right.
Yeah, just the thing that comes up immediately is that we've got we're looking at taking on a grant funding professional, and we need to evaluate them.
Okay, so opportunity, grant funding. Yeah. So the underlying thing is here, there's an opportunity to receive grant funding. Yeah. Of which one potential thing might be taking on a specialist to help us win it, or various other things. Yeah. So I'm going to publish that. So I add that challenge to the system. Now, what you'll see is here we're looking at grant funding. Actually, let's just change that. So win. So the challenge is win grant funding. Okay. So in the overview here, you can see it's not sponsored. There's no deadline. Is there a deadline for that, Nick?
Yeah, we've got to get the project's got to be delivered in 2 years, so we've got to get the grant funding in within a year.
Okay, I don't know how to skip forward a year, so we'll just do it month by month. Sorry. Okay, right. So deadline is 30th of April. There. Okay, and I'm going to sponsor this myself, just so it's actually let's not sponsor it yet. Right. So here we have this is some guidance for how to frame this issue so that people understand it. So background, why is it important to analyze this issue? So sort of grant funding is non-dilutive, cash for innovation, expansion, which we need. Okay, so the idea is that we put in details here which frame to everybody, why is this something we should be paying attention to? So what are contributing factors? What's going on, who does this impact, how, when, why? So the idea is to sort of frame this so that people can go, okay, I understand why we're talking about this. Often a challenge in decision making is the problem is either not framed at all or is framed in a way that is not helpful. So we're trying to encourage people, and as we go forward, we may use tools like GPT to summarize, to help you go, have I framed this in a way that other people are going to understand this and see why I think this is something we should deal with. Okay, so if I go back to the agenda now, you'll see we have one unsponsored item in here, which is my new item. Kim, would you mind going in and scoring that for me? And I'll do the same. So, okay, so that's in an agenda. It's in the unsponsored agenda. It will live there for some period of time before it gets archived. And the archiving process will kind of take it into someone, and I'll show you in a second how that works. But for now, what we're going to do, so the next step is to go, well, why should we be paying attention to this? So I'm going to analyze this challenge, and I'm analyzing it in 3 contexts. So one is impact. Okay, so this opportunity, how much impact does this potentially have for us? Well, you know what, actually, it's not quite game changing because we're rocking a lot, but it's up there. Time frame, it's actually not close because we're talking about funding in a couple of years time, so that's sort of reasonably distant. Likelihood, yeah, more than not. Okay, so I've scored this. Kim, if you can make your scores wildly different to mine, please. So I've now scored this, and you can see here's my score. So I've given it a 9 for impact. Time frame is far out, and likelihood 7. Kind of, it's there, but it's not. So this is something that's sort of a long-term but potentially impactful opportunity. Now, Kim playing devil's advocate here. You can see the purple bar represents the range of values across the team. So Kim doesn't think it's got a lot of impact at all, but she does think it's closer than this, right? So the idea here is, as people score this, we can start to go, well, why do you see this as high impact and I don't? What's going on here? What are you seeing that I'm not? Or why do you think this is very likely and I think this is very unlikely? So we reflect how the team look at this across important dimensions. And 2, we can start to see, are we aligned? Because ideally, there would be no purple bars. We'd all see this much the same way, or the bars would be very small, like the one on time frame here, which would tell us we're pretty closely aligned. While we're not aligned, we should be discussing it. And so that's the discussion. So why don't you think this is important, Kim? All right, so we have discussion in here. We're about to add document upload, which I never expected to add because I assumed customers would go, no, we've got SharePoint, things like that. We want you to integrate. But actually what they said was, God, no, please don't integrate SharePoint. I can't bring third parties into it. People keep deleting stuff. So you can see Kim's already, I mean, she's telling me why. Fabulous. Okay, I'm persuaded. So basically what it was they want, my phrasing, not theirs, they want a single source of truth for the complex strategic decision making in their organization. They don't want it spread around everybody's different inbox. They don't want documents off in places where they get lost, can't be found or deleted. Can we have a sort of single source of truth? So the idea is AgendaScope becomes that single source of truth, and each issue contains everything related to that issue. We will obviously implement integrations with other things. For example, this conversation could be going on bidirectionally in Slack or Teams chat. We can allow you to email directly into a challenge, that type of stuff. So in the future, we will implement that. And then the point really is, we decide that this is something impactful that we need to make a decision. So how do we make a decision? Okay, so the first thing is to suggest a decision. So one decision might be appoint a grant writer agency. Right now, is this a type 1 or type 2 decision? Well, this is a type 1 decision because actually once we've spent the money with them, we don't have it to spend again. So once we've worked with an agency, we're pretty much stuck with them. So we need to sort of proceed with caution. And again, we've got headings in here to sort of go through, why is this an important approach to this? So why is this a fit response to this issue? Yeah. So I'm not going to do anything there. I'm just going to add this. Okay. So here we have this. We can edit it. Decisions can have their own owners, so this probably would be the person responsible for implementing this. So if Nick was in our system, we'd be adding Nick. And decisions can have their own deadlines. And this is really important because particularly for decisions, good decisions often leave the table before the problem comes due. There's a great thing we can do in response to this, but if we don't do it by the end of this month, it's gone, and then we're left with a lot of shit. So we track the deadline on a decision separately to the deadline on the item itself. Yeah. Okay, so here you can see we've added a particular decision. I'm going to write it myself. This is potentially also irreversible, but let's say it is reversible. Okay, waste of time. Don't do anything. This is irreversible because once we've kind of abandoned it, we've abandoned it. Okay, so now we have 3 alternatives. You imagine, depending upon the gnarliness of the issue, we might generate 5 or 6 different alternatives that represent our response to this particular challenge. So we've identified that it's something we want to deal with. It's been prioritized. So if I come back to here, you can see, where's it gone? Oh, it's not been sponsored yet. Right, so let me sponsor it now. So I'll sponsor this. And now if I go back to the agenda, you can see win grant funding is actually at the bottom of the priority agenda. Yeah, so its score is 41. Now, what that means is that we should probably still be paying attention to GPT large language models, which turns out to be our #1 thing. Winning grant funding didn't push itself to the top of the agenda. So while we recognize it's important, it's not as important to the things that we were already doing. So we want to make a decision about this. So we've got some options here. So GPT large language models, here are the alternatives we've developed. We've discussed it, we've analyzed it. You can see we've got a bit of division, but fundamentally we all think it's important. So how do we make a decision? So now if as the sponsor, I turn voting on for this issue. And now if it come here, what we have is called a quadratic voting interface. Quadratic vote. So the challenge with one person, one vote is people tend to get deadlocked around a fixed position, right? This is my position. I'm going to stick to it come hell or high water. What QV does is allow people to express a weight of preference. So here's how it works. For this issue, I have 100 credits to spend, which I can use to buy votes for or against the 3 alternatives that we have here. So for example, I might go, yes, I like the idea of us implementing this API for document summarization. I think it would be a mistake to ignore it. And yes, I like the idea of engaging a prompt design agency. But what you can see is I've spent 1 credit and I bought 1 vote. To buy 2 votes cost me 4 credits. So the quadratic bit is the number of credits is the square of the number of votes. So 3 votes cost me 9. If I just reset a second. So if I really want to, I can spend all my 100 credits to buy 10 votes. But if you think about it, a few people spending 9 or 16 credits each can buy more than my 10 votes, right? 3 people spending 16 credits put 12 votes. Yeah. So somebody going, this is the only thing, can't actually outweigh the team. They can't buy enough votes to really get their opinion through. And what that leads to is a more nuanced view of, well, you know what, actually, this is kind of my favorite option. I could live with this one. I think it would be a big mistake to ignore this. So I'm going to spread my support. And here we've got something where I'm like, this is the option that I prefer. I could live with this. Don't do this. Yeah. Kim, could you go vote for this one as well? So the idea is now, bear in mind, we're a fully asynchronous platform here. So this doesn't have to happen in a meeting. None of this has to happen in a meeting. And indeed, we can reserve meeting time for discussion of really thorny issues that really require face-to-face time based on, here's the information. It's not, did you read the board paper the kind of 5 minutes before on the train? It's, we're actually here discussing things. And now we've come to vote. And all of this can happen asynchronously, offline, well, online, I guess, offline in face-to-face terms, which means that we can turn that face-to-face time back into quality time to discuss meaningful things, but focused. You can imagine having AgendaScope on a screen in your board meeting or your management meeting. It's like, we're talking about this. Oh, you want to talk about something else? Well, why don't we just log that as a challenge and come back to it, and let's stay focused on talking about this thing. Kim, give me a nod when you've done your voting. You've done your voting. Okay, so we've had some time to vote. We will be implementing probably a calendar-based system fairly soon. So voting starts on Monday and ends on Friday rather than doing it as a toggle. But for now, I've got a toggle. So as sponsor, I can say, right, voting is over. And now if we come here, we can see, okay, we've got a clear winner. 12 votes for, 11 votes against, 9 votes in favor. So essentially, we're just summing the votes to come up with a score to say, okay, this is now the winner. Now, what this means is that this now goes into the journal. And the journal is where decisions go. So once you've made a decision, it moves out of the agenda into the journal. Here is the decision that has been made. We can, for example, stick webhooks off the back of this. So once the decision's made, do you want to generate a project in Asana for the implementation of this decision? We are building feedback loops in. So you can imagine 3 months, 6 months, 12 months after the decision's been made, that the system will pop up and go, you know, you made this decision. Has it been implemented yet? Are you happy with how it's going? So we can start to give you feedback about decisions. One of the things that I didn't really talk about here is we've got tags on this. So we've tagged this one AI product and tech. So we can start to do things like reflecting You make technology decisions very slowly. Would you like to know how to speed them up? Kim is amazing at product decision making. Matt is lousy. Why are you listening to Matt? You should be listening to Kim. Yeah. So there's all sorts of learning we can do off the back of this. So the journal is where stuff comes. But the nice thing is I can go back into this issue. I can look at, why did we make this decision? It's 12 months later. We decided that we were going to implement this. Why the hell did we do that? Oh, yeah, okay, I see why we did it. We all thought it was important. This is what we discussed. Here's some documents where somebody put in data of evidence about why GPT was going to be amazing. Yeah, okay, I get it, right? The last thing to show you is the radar. So this is the beginnings of visualizing the information we have in the system. I have a guy who's ex-media treasurer of the Wall Street Journal building version 2 of this. This was a version I built for a demo, which has sort of stuck around a bit too long, but it gets the job done, I guess. So here you can see we've got a couple of opportunities that are basically sort of here. So we've got proximity on the x-axis, likelihood on the y-axis, green for opportunity, red for problem. We will do a colorblind version. Size of the bubble is proportionate to its impact. The halo tells you about how much indeterminacy there is there. So it's essentially a standard deviation on impact. And the idea is to give you a view of, you know, what's ahead of us. So lists are great. We can look at lists. The radar is a different way of kind of grappling with what's in front of us. Yeah. So that's the product as it stands. So it's for horizon scanning. What's ahead of us? What should we pay attention to? Prioritization of the things we should be paying attention to. What should we make a decision about? A protocol for making that decision. So understanding its importance, discussing it, formulating good alternatives, making a decision based on those alternatives, and then governance. Okay, we made decisions. Where are the decisions we made? Here they are. Here's what the decision was made was. I can step back in time and go, why did we make that decision? And that's AgendaScope.
Thank you,
now,
Matt.
I guess at this point, I should just throw it over to questions, comments, concerns. You're crazy. What are you smoking?
Matt, there was a couple of comments as you was going along, which was from Jim. So, Jim, do you want to explain what you was talking about? Are the documents timestamped?
No, I totally get it now. I love it. I mean, how many times have you sat in a meeting where everyone goes, why did you make that decision? And you say, well, I made the decision based on the information that was available at the time that everybody sent me. And you've just summed it up in the end there, Matt. You're making decisions, everyone's getting involved. You document why you make the decisions. You've got everything in one folder that fed into the decision-making process, and you've got categorical evidence of what people were voting for and who was opposed, and so all those conversations that normally go on in board meetings where people say, I told you so, you can actually say, no, you didn't. You actually said this and this, and here was your reasoning. And I honestly, I love it. Well done. It looks a great product.
Thank you.
The thing I love about it, Matt, is I used to run I used to chair a board of governors at a school, and this would have been transformatory for that. Just because getting everyone in a room together was always a nightmare, but also succession planning was a nightmare. Partly because the minutes were always really poorly done, and decisions hadn't actually been planned, implemented, or documented in any way. And it's absolutely not where your market is, but this in the charity sector.
Well, no, our first customer is I've got my first customer, and hopefully next week my next customer are both trustee-led organizations.
Yeah. All right. Certainly, the charity that I'm a trustee on, this would be a very, very interesting product for, and any board of governors at a school, I could see this being a real game changer. I mean, that's without the corporate. That's just my life.
Yeah, I would add to that. Absolutely. I can see so many, school governance meetings that I've been on. They would snap this up without without a doubt. And so many of them are having to make some really challenging decisions right now because the it's changing so vastly, and they haven't got the skills necessarily to do it, and certainly not the tools. So I think it's lovely, genius. Well done, Matt. I can't wait to chat how we can do some sort of collaboration with YakBit for the next part, or one part
Brilliant.
of it.
Well, you'll see why I thought there was a clear overlap for us.
Yeah, brilliant.
Matt, Henry's got his hands up with a question.
Henry, please.
Matt, how are you planning to monetize it, and what is the ballpark price for this product?
Okay, so our launch pricing is £2,500 per month for up to 5 groups, a fixed approximately £2,000 onboarding fee to cover about 3 to 4 months of onboarding, and an optional, I think we put it at £2,000 a month for strategic support, which essentially is, how do you make the best of this? Are you framing things right? Is the system reflecting your discussions? Are your discussions reflecting the system? So clearly it's priced, it's punchy pricing, but we think that reflects the value of what we're doing, because fundamentally we're talking about the most complex, important decision for your organization. If you're not willing to spend a couple of grand on that, really, are they that important? Is kind of the line. However, what I'm doing is, for the first approximately half a dozen customers, I'm doing a pilot customer program, which essentially means is you sign up for a minimum of 6 months, you kvetch privately to us about all the shit that doesn't work. At the end of 6 months, if you want to stay a customer, you become a referenceable case study, and in return I will grant you a 50% lifetime discount on the pricing. So that's the offer I'm making to the first sort of half a dozen customers.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, right now, candidly, I need customers more than I need money. Although I do need money, I need customers more. So we brought our UX company in, so they're going to become a paying customer. They're not paying quite the going rate yet. So I am sort of willing to do mates deals for where there is an interesting case to be made. So if somebody from HP comes along and says, will you do me a sweetheart deal? I'm like, no, go away. I'll come back to you in 2 years' time with enterprise pricing. But I want customers, and I want a range of customers that teach us how this is going to work, because there are an awful lot of challenges ahead of us in terms of how people use this and how they make best use of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we don't do anything this formal, but I mean, we do try to go through a commercially creative process in terms of coming up with ideas for projects for clients. And we put that process in place to formalize what we were doing, get the groups together on at least 3 occasions, discuss each idea, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I can see how this would do that for us, and possibly better. And so I think that you could apply it to almost any challenge, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the point. It's a generic product for helping. What should we pay attention to? Of the things we should pay attention to, which are the most important, and how do we keep them most important? I mean, so I'm talking to a guy who's like, he's running a business that's going super well. And what he said to me when he saw this was, I'm drowning in opportunities. I've got so many opportunities and I have only so many resources. Can I use this to essentially stay on top of which opportunity we want to pursue? And I'm like, yeah, let's talk. Yeah. So really it's just where decision making is important, where there's consequence. So this is not where should we have the Christmas lunch, right? Anything that you can solve in 30 minutes of sort of reasonable person conversation probably should never even end up in here, unless it was important to reflect it. You know what, actually, the Christmas lunch has been a disaster the last 3 years running. We're putting it in here so that we can blame the right person when it goes bad, right? But in general, that type of stuff, you probably don't even get in here. But where there is significant consequence, right? So things like, should we expand into this market? Should we launch this product? Should we take this type of customer? Should we change our customer segmentation? All those sort of things where there is a clear consequence and where actually the right answer is not obvious are grist to AgendaScope's mill. And although you say you don't use a lot of process, actually, if you look at it, I didn't use that much process. I entered the challenge and I typed in some stuff about what it relates to. Well, probably somebody wrote an email somewhere with that type of stuff in, although maybe they didn't spend quite as much time as they should have done thinking about how to articulate the value. where we will probably encourage you to do that. We scored it. Well, everybody mentally scores everything. We're just giving you a way to actually put down what those scores are and saying there are some dimensions that are more important than others. You know what, the impact, it's really important we consider the impact, because that's really what's driving this. So we had a little formality in that there's sliders rather than you just mentally going big, small, what have, far away. Discussion, well, probably you are going to discuss, not much more there. Probably where you see the formality is setting up the alternatives. But my conjecture is, if you're not doing that with something where there is a significant consequence involved, then that's where things are going wrong, because we didn't spend enough time generating really great alternatives. We didn't really sweat doing that. So we ended up with sort of superficial understanding of the problem. The alternatives are all right. And so we get more of the same. Versus actually, you know what, this could be act 2 for the business. This could be a real game changer. We need to get this right. But equivalently, where there isn't massive amounts of impact, well, maybe you never get to that point because it never gets high enough in the agenda. Or maybe the generating alternatives is relatively easy because you've got a bunch of people who understand the problem domain, and the formality is just writing it down in advance. Well, how formal is that, I guess, is what I'm saying. So yes, I get you. It feels formal because when I show it to you in this compressed form, but if you think about using this here and there over time, oh, I've just had an idea, I'll log a comment. Oh, actually, we could do this. I'll add an alternative. And maybe I'll come back and fill in the details later. Or somebody will poke me and go, you added this alternative. Why the hell should we pick it? In a more natural way of working, that sense of formality may not be there. And indeed, what you may benefit from is the ability to be very informal, but still keep things under control and keep things moving in a direction, because the system will encourage that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, no, it's great. I love the voting system. I love the voting system because I you know, when we vote for ideas, we tend to kind of like, you know, create a Google Doc and rank and rate the ideas with different aspects of that idea in mind. And then invariably there will be something that comes to the top, which is the craziest and most stupid idea, you know? And I think your voting system would get rid of that. But yeah,
I take no
it's really
credit
cool.
for that. Lewis Carroll was one of the progenitors of QV, in fact.
Okay.
Yeah, the ability to express weight of preference, we think, is transformative, particularly in commit and teams that adopt a disagree but commit mentality. I think this will be particularly transformative for them because this will basically emphasize the way they've worked anyway. I can say I don't like this as much, so I can be heard, my voice is heard, but I'm willing to take the compromise decision.
Yeah,
Nick.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that one of the lovely things about encouraging you to look actively at the alternatives and to be able to both discuss out those alternatives within the decision-making process is really powerful, but also to have that documented and recorded so that you can go back and analyze and learn from that process once you've found out how successful it's been, is a really interesting loop to have the documentation of it automated during the process. And I can think of several times during my life where we've gone, how did we get here?
Yeah.
And the grant, the reason grant funding came to mind is that during a part of one of my other lives, we've appointed a grant funder. How effective is he being? Well, when we were appointing him, what did we do to check that was that a criteria when we were appointing him that he would be effective in this area? Nobody can remember.
Yeah, I've seen this so often that it's a decision got made. One, that's not the decision we made, is it? Which is the first one you get. I don't remember just making that decision. Well, actually, you did. Why? No, oh well, I'm sure. Well, didn't Bill drive that? Oh, well, where's Bill? Well, Bill left. Great. So all the information about why we made that decision walked out the door. It's turned out to be a terrible decision. All we can do is curse Bill in hindsight. We use this line about turning hindsight into foresight, which I think is quite cute. Graham.
Yeah, love that, Matt. Just in the area that I particularly work with, ESG and B Corp and so forth. I mean, this would be a fantastic tool in terms of engaging stakeholders and materiality assessments, and just to get that engagement and get people to put forward their ideas and get behind certain ideas. And it's an area where undoubtedly there's so many opportunities and challenges to face, but obviously so many decisions to make, whether it's the right, the wrong. We're all still learning the space in terms of where the right way to go is. And just be fantastic to go back and look, because ultimately you're going to have to iterate on these things as you go through and chop and change and understand, well, why did we decide to go with this or that or whatever? Yeah, brilliant. Certainly if you could be expanded out and you could sort of have almost like a more public facing, or to bring in sort of community voices into this, as in that wider stakeholder rather than just internal, would be fantastic and wonderful.
That's certainly something that's either possible now or on the cards. It's interesting. I was talking to a lady who was tasked with rolling out ESG training across the UK for the organisation as part of. And when she looked at this, she said, "Well, you really put the G in ESG. I've got all the ES stuff, but there is no governance. You've got the governance tool." So we're like, "Well, yeah, I guess we have." So yes, we and it's perhaps no surprise that two of our early prospects are trustee-led organisations where fear of governance failure is a key part of what keeps them awake at night, and being able to be more reassured about, what, I could stand my ground and justify why we made this decision, becomes really useful. Or just, we're going to make mistakes, let's make sure we learn from them.
Yeah, I think the other thing to maybe think of as well is, as we go forward in terms of corporate responsibility for the effect of climate change, for example. And I think also from I suppose a risk perspective, some boards might say, well, hold on, if further down the road, if it's found out that we made it, well, at least we can go back and prove, well, this is what we went through. This is who
this is what we knew at the time. We did all the reasonable things. Yes, okay. Since then, these things have happened, but that was not on the cards at the time. And obviously, one of the things people often get pilloried for is the historical is brought to today, and it's like, well, you did this. It's like, well,
in
actually,
hindsight,
you know what?
Why did you do that? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So absolutely.
Matt, a couple of questions from the chat was from, Jim, about the price, and I'd like a question around the price as well. Is
okay?
Ed, this will rule out a lot of startups, and then and then I've got a follow-on question, which is along that lines. If you talked about learning, and it's harder to learn with less customers, obviously because of price. Will there be two different types of prices? Will there be one where you said that you help them go along compared to where they can just use?
Right. So maybe I should talk about pricing strategy and how I ended up with the pricing I've got. So one of the challenges is startups very often have little to no cash at all. So if I said this is 500 a month, it probably wouldn't make materially much difference to me saying this is 2,500 a month for many startups, right? There are startups that can pay, but the challenge for startups often is they can't pay. And right now, this is not a product that I feel I can just give to anybody and expect them to make hay with. I think it requires some onboarding support. It requires some strategic support, and those things are expensive. So our sweet spot right now, we think, is sort of SMEs 20 to 200 million and charities with a turnover of about 5 million plus, of which there are something like 2,000. So my focused aim is, and the pricing is designed for engaging with mid-sized SMEs and bigger non-profits. I will cut sweetheart deals with startups to the extent that I think they can get away without a lot of support, that I like the CEO, and that I think they're going to teach us something useful. So the pricing is sort of on application for them. But essentially what I don't want to do is try and go out and sell startups, because it's so situational about whether they'll spend money at all. And I've had it go both ways. I've got a guy, which is basically two people running a startup. And he's like, well, can I use this? And I'm like, well, it's not really designed for you. What would you be? You don't have a budget. Well, what would you pay? I'm expecting to say like $9.99 a month. He said, oh, I don't know, it's about £700 a month. Right. Okay, well, maybe this is for you. So the pricing is designed to engage with SMEs. Where I come across startups that I think can make use of the platform without sucking up, frankly, too much of my time, I'll cut a sweetheart deal for them. And then when I've got enough money that I can, and I've got online resources and stuff like that, then I'll come back around with some startup appropriate pricing. Does that help? Or does it at least make it clear?
Yeah, that's cool on my side. Kim said, do you want large enterprises to see this yet? I assume
No.
that's no, you don't know. No one's seen it at the moment.
So large enterprises, I think in about 18 months to 2 years, I'll come knocking on the doors of large enterprises. Right now, I couldn't support one. So if HP came along and say, we want to roll this out across the world, I'd be like, well, you'll kill us. You won't pay us. You'll work us like dogs and we'll die. So I don't want them. And I also don't want them sniffing around what I'm doing until I'm established in the market and I'm like a tick. I'm sort of embedded and I can't be dug out. I'm not worried about competitors. I've seen one UK competitor come and go, and there's a very specific reason which I won't share why I'm not worried. I'm perfectly happy for there to be competitors, and if I end up as 7 or 8 or even number 10 in this market, I will be well pleased, because this market is going to be enormous. Right? What business wouldn't benefit from making a few less crap and a few more good decisions? There isn't any business or organization that doesn't need this, whether they know it or not. So this market is going to be enormous. I'm not trying to encourage any of you to set up competitors, please don't. But frankly, this is going to be a big market. Timing, I mean, every startup I've ever done in my life has been 3 to 5 to 7 years ahead of a viable market. This time, not. I'm right in a market where we are there is need. I was expecting to get a lot of pushback about problem. I get no pushback from any prospect about problem. I was expecting to get pushback about pricing, and so far most people have taken it like a lamb, at least with the discount. It's like, yeah. So for example, with one prospect, I explained the pricing, I explained the discount, and I said, look, I mean, it is what it is. I'm giving you 50%. I mean, is that fair, or do you need to beat me up over pricing? Do you need more? And he went, yeah, no, that's fair. Another prospect I'm talking to, we went over the pricing. I said, so what do you think about it? He's like, well, it's a bit more than I expected, but I can see the value, right? So I'm kind of in a channel that I think works, and I will accommodate larger businesses when I can afford an enterprise sales team and an enterprise support team. I'll start going after corporates, and I think we'll make out like bandits in that space.
Very cool, Matt. Giancarlo just virtually just give you a big thumbs up. Absolutely loves the product.
Thank you, Jan.
I won't read through exactly what he said, but it was very, very good. Such a good idea. And then I think you virtually, where was it? Not the gaming. How can it be gamed? I think you sort of answered that with your last question, which is, can anyone look at it and just hop here and do it?
Well, look.
Not talking
Clearly,
about, it's me actually. I just asked Matt, what are the opportunities for gaming it? You know, everything can be gamed by those,
yes,
the users. I'm talking about the users rather than competitors.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so anytime humans are involved in anything, we are playing a game, and humans are very well wired to play games. So ultimately, there's not much you can do about that other than put, I mean, in chaos theory terms, boundaries and attractors. How do we attract the right behaviors? How do we create boundaries? So in the first place, working with the stakeholders to establish what the rules of the game are. So right now, for example, I wouldn't take a team that was massively dysfunctional. We've got 2 or 3 people who disrupt everything. It's like, well, let me introduce some good leadership coaches, and when you figure your shit out, come back and we can talk. So in the first place, not taking on teams where there's people whose remit is to play games, and then to set up appropriate boundaries and attractors. So what does good look like, and how do we aim for that? And what are things that suggest this is going wrong? And one of the reasons why my involvement, I think, is going to be key, is about working with the stakeholders to ensure that those boundaries and attractors are leading to the right outcome. And honestly, I don't know really, I mean, I'm bullshitting now, right? Because I don't really know how this is going to work. But this is my start for 10 is, we design how we hope it will work and what we think the outcomes are going to be, and then we iterate around that as we go, and we look for what's working and what's not. But again, that's one of the reasons why I'm picking particular kinds of organizations. I need them to be willing to pay money to make this work, because we think it's going to require our involvement. Now, everything we do is training an expert system called Guru, which is going to be the heart of, if you like, version 2 of this product, is an expert system which is going to help monitor what you're doing, make suggestions, and potentially even start taking actions on your behalf. And there's a range of features that are not in this, partly because we didn't have time and partly because I had very good UX people slap me around the face every time I said, could we just? But there are clearly some things that we are going to do in here which will speak to those kinds of things as well. Modeling of what good behavior looks like, resources to help understand how to operate the system properly and how to get what you want. Does that sort of go some way to answer the question? I really have a lot of hand waving.
One of the other things I love the fact that you can upload documents to it, so you've got one repository. Are you going to have the ability to be able to bulk download that to archive it yourself? I
guess. I mean, we don't have document upload yet. That was as of our meeting this morning. That was because it's come out of the paying customer. That was kind of like, oh, they want it, right? So we need to do it. So we'll have that probably by next week. The ability, yeah, I guess we'll probably have a thing for people to say, download me an archive of everything about this issue. I don't see why we wouldn't. They've got access to it after all. We're also going to be looking into using GPT and Cargill Universal Summarizer to help summarize it. So somebody uploads a technical report. So for example, I fed the 100-page GPT-4 reports to Cargill's Universal Summarizer, and it came out with a pretty cogent 1-page plus some bullet points summarization of that document. So somebody uploads a technical report, we can then auto summarize that. So the summary is there with the document. Oh, I don't really have time to read this whole document. What's the key points? Here they are. So there's all kinds of stuff we can do about making that stuff more useful. I'm obviously a little concerned about using GPT for that type of thing, since we know GPT is capable of fabricating the entire report. The Cargill Summarizer, on the other hand, is a different type of technology and doesn't suffer from that type of problem. I mean, are we going to have GPT running your board meeting? Well, I won't worry about it. Our new chair is GPT-5.
Matt,
any more for any more?
Yeah, I was going to say, any more questions? No. Matt, I think you've won everyone's vote. Anyway, if we was voting on this product now, we'd be all voting an unanimous yes anyway. So
excellent.
Well done. The platform looks
great.
The
last thing I would say then is, obviously, if any of you are interested in playing with this for your business, I'm happy to talk. Now, what I would say is, I can't afford anybody to be free, so you have to be willing to pay something. But I'm willing to negotiate about what the price is if you'd like to try this in your organization. If you know people in other organizations where you think this might be good for them. So somebody has introduced me to some housing associations. I've got people introduced me to businesses. If you know any organizations where you think actually this would be pretty sweet. I'm working with Dave Plunkett at the moment about our partner program. We don't have something in place, but I will sweeten the deal for you to make it worthwhile introducing good people to us. So in either case, please do drop me a line. And obviously, I'd love to have some of you guys as customers if I can.
Yeah, Matt, thank you very much.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you, Matt.
Well done, yeah,
that was really cool.